Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. This podcast has evolved over the 5+ years since it first launched. From now on, I'm going to be talking about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. And also mindset, of course, but mindset of all kinds, not just business mindset. I think. Things are changing for me, as you may have noticed if you've been following me online or listening to this podcast, so anything goes here. I hope you stay along for the ride. Thank you so much for joining us today, and now let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 290. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm back with another co-hosted episode with the fabulous Joe Casey. Today, we are talking about a topic that was sent in by a listener. So we're talking about spirit guides, our higher self, tapping into our intuition, and we discuss whether or not it's disempowering to get guidance from external sources, and whether we should just rely on our own intuition and our higher self for everything. So again, this was inspired by an email that I received from a listener. She says, spirit guides versus inner self. This has been on my mind for a while and has come to the foreground while I've been taking Lisa Wechtenheiser's Woo Woo 101 course. I've been wondering, if you rely on spirit guides for guidance, is that not disempowering? Your inner self has all the answers, right? So is looking to spirit guides or things like pendulums, etc., not giving your power away? Is it trusting external factors rather than trusting your own inner guidance? Or are they simply all coming from the same place? I would love to have more clarity on this since it feels a little woolly in my head. I love this topic. The second the email came in, I was like, this is it. I want to do it. I want to talk to Joe about this. I want to maybe talk to Joanna as well about this. I think this is a really juicy topic, and I'm really happy with how we explored it here. I may continue to think about this in coming weeks and perhaps maybe do a follow-up episode with Joanna Hennon about this, because obviously she's going to have a different perspective. So I think this is a super juicy topic and really interesting and worth exploring. And I look forward to hearing your feedback on this. Like, what do you think about it? So first of all, what are you going to learn in today's episode? We are going to talk about what are spirit guides and why might you want to connect with them. We're going to answer the question, do things like lineage and ancestors come into play with all this? Are angels, ghosts, and ancestors like spirit guides? What are they trying to guide us to or from? What kind of guidance can they give us? What is your higher self? And how do you know the difference? How do you know if it's your guide speaking or if you're just making it up? Do you hear voices? Do you see things? How can you trust this guidance? Is listening to guides abdicating responsibility to someone or something else? Is it our ego that says we should primarily be led by our own intuition while ignoring other possible sources of guidance? What kinds of things can you ask for or help with in your life? And how can you get started channeling your own guides should you choose to do more with this? I have some links in the show notes with how to get started in terms of hiring someone else to make first contact, books you can read, courses you can take, and it's all really affordable stuff. These aren't kind of the high-end, super crazy expensive courses. They're all $100 or less, I think, or £100 or less. And they include ways that I learned how to channel my own guides, because I was not born doing this. I only started doing it, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it's absolutely something that you can learn to do. It's not something that you are born doing. So without further ado, I will turn you over to this episode, which I think is super interesting. And again, I really look forward to hearing feedback from you.
Hi, everybody. This is Joe Casey. I'm here with Holly Wharton. Hi, Holly.
Hi.
Hi. We're doing our monthly Tapping Into Your Woo, Business of Woo, Let's Talk About All Things Woo episode, which I have to say, I'm enjoying so much. I'm learning so much. I'm getting to ask the 70 bazillion questions that are in my head about all of this stuff. I hope it's as fun for you, Holly, answering all my questions.
It is, because
it's helping me to kind of formulate my perspective on this stuff. This is stuff that I kind of live and experience, but I don't necessarily talk about in this way with other people. So it's really helping me kind of get clear on how I see this stuff. So it's very, very useful, and it's very fun.
Good. Just as long as it's not just some self-indulgent thing that I'm forcing you to do and others to listen. So yes. I'm really intrigued by today's topic. Really intrigued, because this is an area where I am really curious but clueless. Mm-hmm. The idea came from an email that you had. Do you mind reading out the email from a listener?
So this is from a listener, and she has a question regarding spirit guides versus inner self. She says, this has been on my mind for a while and has come to the foreground while I've been taking Lisa Wechtenheiser's Woo Woo 101 course. I've been wondering, if you rely on spirit guides for guidance, is that not disempowering? Your inner self has all the answers, right? So is looking to spirit guides or things like pendulums not giving your power away? Is it trusting external factors rather than trusting your own inner guidance? Or are they all simply coming from the same place? I'd love to have more clarity on this, since it feels a little woolly in my head. And the second I saw that email come in, I realized I was dying to talk about that with someone. And not necessarily do this episode on my own, but do it with someone else so that we can kind of bounce ideas off each other and share them with people. I think this is a really, really, really juicy topic. So very much looking forward to this.
It is, because when you first suggested it, I was just like, oh, I have so many questions. I have so many questions here. Okay, so my experience is that I think I've become much more aligned and in tune with my own sense of intuition.
Yes.
And knowing the difference between what is actual intuition and what is, say, fear talking, or what is kind of old patterns and things like that. It's a very different kind of... I still think we have to be aware. In fact, I think it's really important to be aware of those, because
absolutely
you can be led in a very wrong direction if you're not truly tapped into that kind of flow of intuition. However, I have no experience that I am consciously aware of right now with spirit guides. And I'm saying that because, just in case you're about to say, well, Joe, you have them all the time, you're just not listening to them. The whole idea of spirit guides to me is... So, we talked that I'm a seeker and I'm kind of, expanding the edges of my woo. This is kind of beyond my edge at the moment. This is right on the edge and beyond. It's not that I have any rolly eyes feeling about it. It's just I am clueless. I know so many people who are very aligned and very tuned into, and we'll talk about spirit guides. We'll talk about listening to angels and ancestors, and I know this concept is really familiar and at the heart of many spiritual beliefs across the world and across history, but I have no conscious experience of it. So I have, like I say, 70 billion questions about this.
Yay!
But I know you do have experience. So would you mind sharing that a little bit?
Yeah. So much like most of the stuff I'm doing in my life today, this is fairly new to me. I mean, I think it was about 6 years ago that the concept of spirit guides first came into my awareness. And I had done a reading, like a psychic reading with my friend Sanit, who's very, very psychic and very, very tapped into this stuff. And we sat down and she kind of opens up and she says, well, the first thing your guides are saying is, finally you're listening to us. Finally, you're tapping into us. And I was like, oh, okay. And so she's talking about the spirit guides and, how they've been waiting for me to finally open the channel of communication. And I was really I didn't really understand what spirit guides were at the time. And I was like, is that like I have a spiritual teacher, but he's like a human being. Like what is this? And so I was really confused about it at first. And I think it's taken me the last few years to really kind of build a relationship with my guides and understand what they are. So what the heck are spirit guides? They are non-physical entities, energies, beings who, according to this book I have by Sonia Choquette, which is called Ask Your Guides, according to her, they have had at least one experience here in physical reality. So they're spirits who have incarnated at least once, and they're now in the spirit world helping us from that higher place. So that's how I understand them to be. So spirit guides might be someone you know. They might be a family member who's passed. They might be someone that you don't know. They might just be, spirits that have, I think they also might be spirits that you have chosen to work with when you were in between physical incarnations to help you in your next, kind of experience of physical reality. So I think also we kind of engage the help of some spirit guides to help us from the spirit world when we're down here, if that makes sense.
It does. Are they there all the time? Do we have to ask, how did your guides know that you were finally listening to them? I'd say 70 billion questions.
So I think they were just waiting around tapping their feet. I don't know, because I think some guides are with us for a long time, for years. Some guides are with us for just certain things to help us with something very specific, and then they move on. And then I think also as we grow as people and as we grow in terms of our ability and our ways of working with spirit guides, I think we kind of need different levels of guides. So my friend Cara Wilde, who teaches a course on how to channel your guides, always says, if you're going to, or when you sit down to make contact with your guides, always ask for what she calls the creme de la creme of the spirit guides. Like always ask for the best and highest possible guide that you are able to connect with at this point in your life, because you obviously want the highest energy possible for you. So apparently there are kind of all different levels of guides, and they all kind of want to help us, but we need to connect with the highest possible ones.
So it's almost like there's, I don't know, a little army of guides, or a little bureaucracy of guides almost. There's like a hierarchy of guides. Yeah.
Yes, and I found that interesting because I'd never thought about that before, that there might be different levels. And obviously, apparently another thing is that guides really want to help us because they're in the spirit world and we're in the physical world, and they kind of want to kind of have contact with people that are experiencing physical reality because it's exciting for them and they can learn things.
So can we get a crappy guide then? Can one of the lower level ones come through if we're not careful?
I guess so. I mean, I've never had a bad experience with a guide, but I guess, I don't know. I'm so stuck on this one. Like, are there crappy guides or are there just kind of more basic guides? But there must be, because that's why Car's very insistent about how you should always ask for the creme de la creme of the spirit guides. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've had many guides kind of come and go over the years. When I first connected with guides, the first one, her name was Layla, and worked with her not very much. She was just kind of my first touching point. And then from there, I moved on to different ones. And interestingly, one of the kind of guide groups that I worked with in, I think it was 2016 when I walked the Ridgeway. And I got in touch with them thanks to Lisa Wechtenheiser. We were having a session and this group of guides came through that called themselves the Richards. And I was supposed to connect with them every day on this walk and get guidance from them. And I included that in my book on the Ridgeway. And then they kind of stuck around for a while and then they left. And then the guides came that brought me the Heart-Centered Energy works. They called themselves Orion. They kind of left. They kind of come and go.
This is a really basic question, but how do you know when they're there?
Well, when I tap into them.
But what does that feel like? How does that manifest? This is the thing. Do you see them? Do you hear voices? Is it an energy? Is it that kind of... Sorry.
So everyone's different with this. Despite the fact that in physical reality, I'm a very visual person, I'm not clairvoyant. Like, I don't see things that aren't here in physical reality. Like, I don't see the spirit guides. And I know people that do. I have friends that channel guides that have seen their guides show up in their living room. I don't. I hear voices in my head, but only when I want them to be there. So I'm aware of how this sounds. But when I want guidance, I will kind of tap into them and ask them to come in, and I will either write down the guidance or I will hear the voice in my head and I will channel the guidance.
Okay, so you have to open the channel. So it's not like they're kind of going, hey, Holly, when you're trying to sleep or anything like that. No. However, I do know people who have been woken up in the night by their guides.
because there was something that they needed to know. That has never happened to me. It's kind of like they're always there hanging out in the background. And then when I'm ready to connect with them, they're ready. I've never been kind of interrupted in my daily life by guides.
Yeah, that would be annoying, I would imagine. Or really useful, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm kind of imagining you doing like your Asda shop or something, and the guides are kind of saying, no, get those tomatoes, not those ones. But I guess they have more important things to share. And this might be a difficult one to pin down, but how would somebody know, how do you know that it's not just that, one of those inner voices that we have, like our inner wise one, or the inner critic, or, the various parts that we're carrying around in our head? What is the difference? How do you know the difference?
That is an excellent question. And I think that's something that everyone who channels spirit guides or who communicates with spirit guides struggles with in the beginning. How do I know that I'm not making this up? How do I know this is not just a part of myself that's inventing stuff? And I asked this question of Lisa in a session with her years ago. And she said, when I first started channeling my guides, they used really weird language. Like they didn't talk like how I talk. They would say like really kind of lofty sounding stuff, or they would use words that I don't normally use. And I would say that's been absolutely my experience as well. So when I hear the voices in my head, they're not speaking like how I speak. Their language is slightly different. Of course, they're speaking English, but the way they express themselves is different than how I would speak. Now, my friend Cara, who again is a very, very experienced channel, she channels verbally and her voice changes. So she has like an accent when she channels her spirit guides, and she always has as long as I've known her. Now, when I started channeling the Richards, they mentioned this, like they knew that I wanted that. They knew that I wanted like a really clear sign that it was them and not me. And they specifically said to me, we're not going to give you a funny voice. We're not going to give you a weird accent because you need to trust.
Oh, wow. That's also a bit of a kind of them. I can always write it, we are not this kind of novelty group that has come to entertain you. We're going to talk how we're going to talk.
Yeah, and you're going to learn what you need to learn, and you're going to learn how you need to learn it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I think that's another good point, is that they're here to lift us up and help us grow. And that will often take us out of our comfort zone.
I like that. I imagine that I quite like the fact that there's a strength there. It's not just, do you know what I mean? It's not a kind of, they're going to do exactly what, and tell me exactly what I need to hear and exactly what I want to hear and that kind of thing. There seems to be much more kind of independent agency there, which kind of makes it more believable. Yeah,
it kind of makes it more obvious that it's not just stuff that you're making up.
Yeah. Oh no, that's really, really interesting. I've seen people kind of on like Louis Theroux and people like that have done TV shows with people who are channeling.
Ooh.
And they'll change voices. But to be honest, it's usually presented in a kind of semi-mocking way, which has always made me super uncomfortable. I would be really interested in just experiencing that from a much more kind of reverent way, I think.
Yeah, because it is something. I mean, obviously, if you don't believe in this stuff and you think people are making up, I understand how people would mock it. But I would love to see kind of a documentary or something that really kind of respects the process of channeling and connecting to spirit guides and connecting to angels and that kind of thing. Because I think it's a really fascinating topic. And I think if more people tapped into the guidance from their higher self or their spirit guides or their angels, like life would improve for everyone. Because they're here to lift us up. Like they're not going to drag us down. They're helping us kind of be more spiritual in whatever that means to each of us.
There's a couple of really interesting directions that I want to go with this.
Yes.
So this concept of guides, whether it be angels or spirits or ancestors, this has been around as long as humans have been around, yeah?
Yeah.
So this isn't a new thing. So this, again, strikes me as what the kind of the whole mocking and the eye rolliness and we don't understand it strikes me as, again, one of those very modern, fear-based, we're the most sophisticated humans that have ever existed. That's just so dismissive of thousands of years of human experience for a start.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing is, so you mentioned, whether it be spirit guides or angels, is there a difference?
Yeah, so again, I was just kind of thumbing through Sonia Choquette's book, Ask Your Guides, before, like when we were preparing the notes for this. And according to her, angels have never had kind of a physical incarnation, as opposed to spirit guides who have had at least one. So angels apparently are different from spirit guides. She goes through a lot of different kinds of angels in her book. And one thing that I really started doing, and she says that they're all like, they're angels for everything. Like there are parking angels, there are timing angels, there are fitness angels, whatever. So I got into the habit, and this is something that I started doing after I read her book, of just asking for help, like simple help whenever I needed it. So like I'm pulling into a parking lot, I say, parking angels, would you please help me to find the best parking spot quickly and easily, closest to wherever I need to go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So you always thank them in advance. And then when it comes true, like when I get the help, I will thank them again. But you always thank them from the start. So this is how she recommends doing it, just asking them for stuff that you need help with. And like I said, ridiculous stuff like parking, like I use it all the time. And stuff works out really well for me when I remember to do it. And I don't always remember to do it, but I love it. Just asking for help with the tiniest things.
Okay, so this is wild. So there are parking angels, there are fitness angels. So
There's whatever you have in life, like whatever you experience in life, there are angels, gardening angels to help you with your plants.
See, again, I'm wrestling with this very kind of quote unquote modern Western
very
upbringing that I've had, which is like, surely angels should be onto higher things than parking.
But if they're here to help us and make our lives easier.
True, yes.
I mean, if more people asked for help from the parking angels, then everything would flow and everything would be easier. So she talks about these spirit guides called runners, and I think it's the runners. She talks about runners and helpers. It's one of those that are the kind of angels or guides that are able to help you with this kind of stuff. And their existence is helping us with the little stuff in life. Yeah.
Okay, right. My mind is exploding into 1,000 little pieces. So this question then that you had from the listener about, is it then abdicating some of our responsibility to tune in and ask for help from our spirit guide or the angels or the ancestors? Should we be more kind of taking agency over our spirituality? I think that's a really interesting question.
I love this question. It's a question that's kind of come up with friends because remember also during a Master Gut call one time, I was talking about how, I asked the angels for everything. I was talking about how I really struggle with the concept of, how we all create our physical reality. Like I understand the concept, but sometimes, like a lot of times, I feel like I'm not consciously creating my reality. I'm kind of unconsciously creating it. That means I don't always get what I want. And I'd mentioned how I always ask the angels for help with this stuff. And one of my friends said, well, they say that when you ask for help from an outside source for something, that's like you saying, I don't believe I can do this myself. Because theoretically, instead of asking the parking angels for help with finding a good parking spot, I could be creating my own reality and saying, I, with my energy and my power as a person, will send out the energy that I'm going to create my perfect parking spot. So I think it's all up to what works for us, what we feel comfortable with, what we feel capable of doing. So like someone, for example, like me, feels like I'm going to get better results by asking the angels for help because I don't believe that I can consciously create my physical reality, or I feel like I'm not good at it, then, do what works for you. So I think it depends partly on what you're comfortable with, what you feel works for you. And then I think also the more you do this, the more I don't know, it depends, because it can be disempowering in the sense that you're asking help and guidance from these invisible sources, when really, we can do it all ourselves. But I think getting any kind of help from whether it's your higher self or the spirit guides or the angels, that's still lifting you up above the vast majority of people who just kind of do what they can in life.
Well, this might be a bit of a tangent, but I also always remember I was raised Catholic, and so I went to a Catholic school, and I remember, but my dad's an atheist, so I was a really annoying kid in class, so I'd always have all these questions. And I can remember the concept that many Christians believe that people won't go to heaven if they've not been saved, if they've not experienced Jesus. And I was like, well, that's really unfair. And that makes Jesus sound like a bit of a bit vengeful. And I don't think it's nearly that black and white if he's about love. And so I think there's a tendency as human beings to be quite binary about things. It's one or the other. It's individualism or it's collectivism. And maybe this concept of self-agency or tapping into higher power, maybe it's similar. Maybe it isn't as simple as it's one or the other.
Yeah, it's both. It could be both.
It could be both, yeah.
And I do both. I mean, there are times that I consciously tap into my higher self and I tap into the wisdom of my higher self. That is something that I do often. So I think it's a little bit of both. It's finding the mix that works for you. And knowing that even if you choose to tap into spirit guides, angels, or whatever, knowing that ultimately you could do the same stuff yourself. I think that's an important thing to know, even if you choose to work with spirit guides and angels.
Do the guides ever come back and say, you're on your own on this one? This is something you have to do by yourself?
That's a good question. I used to work with the pendulum a lot. And the way I've changed with the way I work with the pendulum has changed over the years. So now I kind of see using something like a pendulum as tapping into my higher self, using my inner wisdom in that way. But for years, I didn't see it that way. And I kind of thought that the pendulum was kind of tapping into, I guess, the spirit world or getting help from an outside source. And there were times where it wouldn't answer me. There were times where I would ask a question and it would just sit there. It wouldn't move. And I get very, very clear yes and no answers from the pendulum. So when it just sits there, I'm like, I know I've asked the wrong question. So I imagine the same would happen from like spirit guides.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So many questions. So spirit guides have had an earthly experience, a human experience, but angels haven't.
According to Sonia Choquette, yes. And that's something that I'd never really kind of thought about or asked myself before reading that book. But yeah.
Okay. Do you know anything about ancestors, or are they our spirit guides? Can they come through as our spirit guide? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So what can we use this for then? Let's look at the kind of the benefits. Why should somebody like me or somebody listening to this who's like, okay, that is like way on the edge of my woo experience.
Yeah.
First of all, what are the benefits of starting to explore working with guides and spirits and angels? And I suppose it's two parts. What are the first steps then? So let's do the first one. Why? What are the benefits? What benefits have you had from kind of tapping into this resource, this experience?
It's like it gives me access to a wealth of information that I don't normally have access to. And it gives me access to a higher perspective that I don't normally have access to. So it's like you think like normal life, you're kind of walking through the valley, you're surrounded by hills and mountains and things. But when you're tapping into your higher self or your spirit guides or your angels, it's like you're at the top of the mountain and you can see a broader perspective of what's going on in your life, how to deal with specific situations, what types of goals to set, what you're capable of. It lifts you up and it gives you a broader perspective of everything in your life.
Okay, so I'm forming these questions and then I'm kind of answering them in my own head. And then I've got a really strong voice kind of going, you don't need to know all the answers to this.
I mean, I've learned through experience. So I learned through, I've read Sonia Choquette's book, Ask Your Guides. I think that's an excellent place to start. I took my friend Cara Wild's Channel Your Guides course. And there are these two really well-known channels in the United States who channel these guides called Oren and Daben. And their website is orendaben.com. And they do like channeled music, they do channeled like guided meditations, they've written books, and they've done a course on how to channel your guides. Sanea Roman is the woman. So I did their course as well. Pick one, do all. I think there are many different ways to learn how to channel your guides and how to connect with your guides. And there are different ways of getting the guidance. So like I said, you could channel verbally and record yourself. You can write as the words come into your head. There's so many different ways of doing it.
Are there any ways to say something? So I'm kind of thinking, I'm not sure I'm ready to sign up for a course. I could see myself reading a book, but Are there any ways to even just like take a few steps towards, I'm kind of thinking, is it meditation, or is there a way of just kind of tuning in just to kind of explore on the edges of it?
Yeah. So one way to do it would be to hire someone that you trust that channels your guides, and they can channel your guides for you. And that could be kind of an easy way of getting the assistance of tapping into your guides and kind of making that first contact.
Right. So a bit like that kind of was somebody can kind of do that like distance energy thing. And...
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So that could kind of help open up the conduit, if you like.
Exactly. So you could like hop on a Skype call, tell them that your goal is to make first contact with your guides and them to help you bring through the best guide for you right now in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you can ask them questions. They can, tell you what you need to know in terms of your next steps. And you can also ask them, like, especially if you're going to a professional for this, say, like, what are my next steps for channeling you? Like, how should I be building our relationship? Because this is a relationship, and this is something that I've not been as good at as other friends of mine who are channels. The more you see them, the more you connect with them, the more you communicate with them, the more you're going to build the relationship. So I have friends that have guides that are like, best friends almost. Like they know each other really well and they have a really strong connection. I have not been as good as doing that. So it also depends on what kind of relationship you want with them. Like, do you want someone who's like going to be there to help you out, all the time with everything? I mean, they're going to be there anyway. But like, do you want to be tapping into them every day? You've also got to know what you want.
It makes me think of, there was a phrase that you said on our very first call in this series where you said you see woo as just something that science hasn't explained yet.
Yeah.
And I think of all the kind of the people in history. So we know that some people with genuine mental illness, I don't know why I said genuine mental illness, with mental illness will hear voices. I mean, I'm somebody who has, who manages a couple of mental health conditions, long-term chronic mental health conditions. I've never heard voices. I can imagine that would be very distressing. But then there are also other, I think of Joan of Arc, or think of various saints, again it's my Catholicism coming up, various saints in history who have spoken to the Virgin Mother, or have heard voices that they put down to it being the voice of God, or the voice of the angels. Think of children with imaginary friends, and we always put that down. I think very often that's put down to, it's overactive imagination and children. It's not. Maybe, maybe it's not. Yeah.
I don't think it is. And I have friends that channel Jesus. I have friends, you can absolutely tap into
it's my Catholicism just gone right up and just go, he is far too busy for that.
But that's the thing. They're not. Like, they can help many, many people. Like, they're not limited by time and space in the way that we are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just a really
They're
strong
like multidimensional
kind of
beings. They can be wherever they need to be, whenever. So, yeah, absolutely can channel the saints. You can channel, whatever it is that you want to connect with.
So why aren't they talking to us all the time then? Or are they and we're just not listening?
Well, that's the thing. Like, we really need to approach them. Like, I feel like they're there waiting in the background for us to be ready to open the channel of communication. Like, they're ready, willing, and able. We just need to be the ones to say, all right, let's talk.
And I suppose that a lot of our knowledge and our belief system these days, I was going to say isn't advanced enough, but actually I think this is possibly one of those things that we've unlearned over the years.
Absolutely.
That the kind of age of enlightenment and science, I'm big on science. I'm not on, denying things, but there are also there's a whole swath of things that I think has been dismissed, like shamanism and ancestors and...
Because science doesn't have an explanation for it,
exactly.
So therefore it's not valid.
Exactly. And so, whilst I don't necessarily say we should make global laws and decisions based on non-science backed things, I also don't think we should dismiss them at all just because we don't have because I think I would hazard a guess that most of us have experiences that we cannot explain scientifically.
Yeah.
Whether it be that kind of that feeling, that knowing that person was about to call you and then they did.
Yep.
so many things. And, most people believe in there's more out there than we can actually see and feel. And so I think it's wild that we dismiss all of this stuff so readily just because we don't yet understand it. So I don't know, maybe the guides are just sat there waiting for us to, get over ourselves and talk to them a bit.
Everything I read about this kind of stuff says, they can't help us if we don't ask for help. So, I've been working a lot with plant spirits, with my tree book all of last year. And I've recently been working with plant spirits, like smaller plants, and doing shamanic journeys to meet plant spirits and talking to the plant spirits. And like everything has a spirit. Animals have spirits, minerals have spirits, plants have spirits. So you can tap into those spirits as well.
That, for some reason, that is an area where I feel like I'm nearer to making that link and that connection than I am with spirits. And I wonder if actually my Catholic upbringing kind of does provide a bit of a barrier to the angels. And because there's a lot of, I can remember, I think it was a school assembly kind of messages like, well, the Virgin Mother would never come and talk to you.
Oh,
yeah, because there's been sightings in various places over the world, and one of the questions that was brought up was, well, would the Virgin Mother just deign to come down and talk to these children as if they're undeserving, because there's a lot of guilt and stuff that goes on in Catholicism, and so I'm wondering if that kind of colours my view. Whereas the idea that of plant spirits and even animal spirits, I find much more relatable. It's kind of it's a shorter distance for me to travel.
That makes absolute sense, because we place a lot of value on physical reality. So it's easier to say that person has a spirit, that plant has a spirit, that tree has a spirit, that animal has a spirit, because we see those things, we can touch them.
Yes.
Whereas spirit guides or angels, most people don't see them, can't really touch them unless they kind of show up in some physical way. So it's so much more abstract. Whereas plant spirit, you see that plant, you can touch that plant.
That's so true. And I suppose there, because we've got that connection, it's then easy to make that leap to kind of almost like have that kind of proof of the energy being there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
because
plants are alive. Woman. Like, we know they're alive. Everyone's killed a houseplant and seen it go from beautiful and green to crunchy and brown. Like, we know they're alive and we know they can die. So it's not too much of a leap to say, oh, well, not only is it alive, it also has a spirit.
You're a wise woman, Holly Wharton.
Am I?
You are. No, you are. You are. I was learned so much. So you said that people can hire a professional to kind of open this channel. Do we have links? Are there people that?
Yeah, I can put them in the show notes. So I absolutely recommend my friend Cara Wilde, who is an excellent channel. Lisa Wechtenheiser, who has not only channeled my spirit guides for me, but she was my kind of spirit guide business coach person for a long time. And my friend Joanna Hannon. Those are the kind of the top three people that are excellent channels and absolutely trustworthy and super, super clear. And also, I feel like I need to mention this. You can kind of dictate what kind of information you want to get from your guides. So Joanna Hannon, for example, has been very good at, I don't want to say training her guides over the years, to give her practical information that she can take action on. So she and I were hanging out late last year, and she was channeling my guides, and it was just pure gold, like super useful, actionable information. And I said to them, I was like, this is really good stuff. And they were like, yeah, Joanna's trained as well. She's always made it very clear that like, she doesn't want like the woolly, like airy-fairy stuff. Like it's all practical stuff. And she even says, like, she has been very clear about what kind of information she wants. So if obviously you want practical information about what to do in your life rather than, you will experience a light energy of sparkliness, be clear about what you want and how you want to receive guidance so that you can take action with it and not just kind of be like, oh, that was lovely.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I love that.
You build the relationship how you want it. And, if you end up connecting with spirit guides that are like, no, we want to give you the sparkly stuff, like, be like, please, let's make this practical or let's connect with someone else.
Yeah. That's fantastic. That has been such a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much. Is there anything that we need to mention before we wrap? Because obviously I don't know what I don't know.
Well, I think I'd like to kind of come back to the question that inspired this whole thing. Is it disempowering or not? And I just want to make it clear, like, do what's right for you at each stage of your life. I don't think it's necessarily disempowering to connect with spirit guides and ask for help from angels and external spirits, because they have so much they can teach us, and there's so much that we can learn from them. I mean, I'm learning so much from the tree spirits and the plant spirits, and it's stuff that I wouldn't have access to normally, or I wouldn't know what to ask. But also know that even though I'm going to contradict myself, we do have access to it. We just need to know what to tap into. So yes, our higher self is multidimensional and has access to all the information in the world, but our conscious mind might not know what to ask our higher self with. Whereas I think external stuff like spirit guides and angels might be able to kind of open us up more. That might be a limiting perspective, but that's kind of how I see it. I think there's a time and a place for both. So do what works for you.
That makes a lot of sense. That works for me. That makes a lot of sense. I found this fascinating. I am now very tempted to go and do some more reading around this, and you expand my horizons every time I talk to you.
And we'll put everything in the show notes so that everyone has access to the stuff.
Yeah. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you.
And we will speak to you in a month's time.
Well, I hope you found that interesting and useful. Please drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. You can email me at holly@hollywharton.com. Or you can find me online and get in touch there. I would also love for you to join me on Patreon. If you head to patreon.com/hollywharton, you can join me there. Membership starts at just $1 a month, and you get exclusive access to content I don't share anywhere else, including a monthly Q&A where you can ask me all of your burning questions about anything that you think I might know the answer to. I often think of extra stuff that I want to share, including journal prompts, which I've been adding for a lot of the podcast episodes. You will get those in there as well. So thank you so much for listening. Next week, I will be back with a solo episode, which I don't even know what I'm talking about yet because I've recorded this before going on holiday, and I will be recording that episode when I get back. So thank you so much for listening, and remember to visit hollywharton.com/290 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollywharton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. That's patreon.com/Holly Wharton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.